Hello, welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I am back with my friend Autumn Edwards, back on the show. Hi, Autumn.
Hello, Angela. Thank you for having me again.
Yes, of course. And we are here for our final episode to talk about, not final episode of all time, that sounded crazy. Final episode of the filmmaker Obayashi, who we have done two other episodes on, looking at first his early films, then his middle period, and now we come to the late period of his life and filmography. And we're going to be talking about four of his final films today. And I'm hoping, Autumn, for those who maybe haven't seen the other episodes, you could kind of debrief us a little bit, a reminder about why Obayashi is an important Japanese filmmaker, and maybe what's sort of unique about this later period of his
Yeah,
films.
absolutely. So Obayashi's an incredible, absolutely one of a kind filmmaker, unlike any other. He's important for a number of reasons, not just popularizing a lot of Japanese film outside of Japan with his first commercial film House, but also he was the first amateur filmmaker to get free rein to make a movie. Prior to him, actually, studios had studio directors, and for example, like was with Toho, and he could only make Toho pictures, and Ozu with Shochiku, etc. He was the first freelancer to come on and break that studio system up a little bit and offer a little bit more freedom. So he's really important in that way. And beyond that, I just think he has incredible sensibilities. I love the themes that he presents in his movies, like, for example, the anti-war themes that we're going to explore today, his explorations of youth and rebellion. And I think he just captures a very particular feeling in his films that I just absolutely adore. There's like a wonderful nostalgia to them. Each of them is extremely beautiful, not just in its imagery, but also in its themes. I just think he's a really wonderful filmmaker.
And you are converting people one at a time to the films of Obayashi, starting with me, and then you've also converted our friend Murray, who has started watching his films as well. And so, one at a time, Autumn is convinced that she will convert cinephiles to the work of Obayashi. And you want to explain your background?
What do you mean by my background?
Well, it's from one of his
Or-
films. I just
oh, okay. Yes. Well, actually, I'm still not sure. I'm still sorry.
Oh, the background that is behind you is from a
Oh, my
poster from one of
background,
his
literally the
films.
background. Yes.
Yeah, the
So,
literal background, not your background, like as a person,
yeah.
the background, the visual, the what
Yeah.
people are seeing on screen right now.
So this background is the poster for the first film that we're going to talk about today, Casting Blossoms to the Sky. It's about fireworks, among other things. You'll do the introduction for this one, I believe, so I'll let you
Mhm.
take that away. But that's where this background comes from.
Okay, so we'll start with the first film, which is Casting Blossoms to the Sky, 2012. This is part of the what is called considered Obayashi's anti-war trilogy, which I feel like is a little bit of a misnomer because a lot of his films were anti-war. I'd
Hmm.
say it goes back way before Casting Blossoms to the Sky, even really back to House, his first
Hmm.
feature, and through his last film, Labyrinth of Cinema, which is a very anti-war film. So I think it was just kind of a marketing ploy more than anything. But Casting Blossoms to the Sky, 2012, it's about a journalist who arrives in a Japanese village that underwent destruction during World War II, and then again in the 2004 earthquakes. And it's a town that's famous for its fireworks, that it launches annually in memory of victims of war, thus the fireworks on Autumn's background. And the journalist is there for two reasons. She wants to learn about the experiences of the inhabitants of this town, and then she also is there to watch a stage play that's being put on by a student of her ex-boyfriend. And this play depicts the bombing of the city during World War II. This is one of the films that starts what I feel like what differentiates the anti-war trilogy from Obayashi's earlier films is the films are incredibly ambitious, which means you're either going to find that everything works or they don't work. They're much longer than his earlier films.
Hmm.
They're all of the films we're talking about today range from 2.5 to 3 hours. They are chock full of all of them. All four of the films are chock full of references, historical references, references to war, references to Japanese culture, references to Obayashi's own films. And so they're dense, but they move very quickly. So that's you wouldn't think you think dense, you think maybe like Tarkovsky or Bergman. No, no, no. This is very quick editing with people talking quickly and things are moving at a rapid pace. So that's something that just for the folks who maybe not be familiar with his work, for me as someone who's new to his films, it took me a while to kind of like settle in, I guess you could say to the style of these later films, but they are very innovative in the way that he shoots the films visually. There's a lot of, and I'm not enough of a film scholar to be able to say the right words, but it's like superimposing people on top of backgrounds or imagery. It's kind of like almost like a CGI looking film, but he's actually using real footage, so it's not fake like green screen, if that makes sense. Uh, so I'm not doing a very good job of describing this, so please take it away.
Well, that's just kind of the thing with Obayashi, isn't
It's
it?
hard to
Like,
talk about,
picture's
yeah.
worth a thousand words. He's such a, one of a kind director, like I said before, that you can't really convey it in words. You kind of just have to experience it. But what I really appreciate about this trilogy in general, too, is it is kind of a return to form for Obayashi, who over time had been making more typical commercial films after House, right? But this is kind of a return to that frenetic energy, and the unique like editing and experience of House. Like you said, it's very experimental. It's not concerned with being super polished or anything. But it takes the stylings of, his earlier, more abstract works like House, and then loads it in with so much more depth of theme and,
Mhm.
like drawing on all this Japanese history, like you said. And I think one of the great things about these films too is Obayashi considers them all hometown films because they're very like set in a specific place, right? They draw history not just from Japan, but the specific towns that they're set in. Like, for example, this one is set in Nagaoka, and like you said, it's largely about the fireworks that they create there to, commemorate the bombing of Nagaoka. So I just think they're all very personal, and that's something that I really appreciate about Obayashi too. He makes these commercial films, but they're also deeply personal, and you can feel
Mhm.
that in the films themselves.
Yeah, even the next one we'll talk about, he actually helped crowdfund. The film was crowdfunded by the actual people in that village. So, I mean, when
Mhm.
you talk about someone being a localist director and personalized, Obayashi is an amazing example of that. Casting Blossoms to the Sky out of the anti-war trilogy, out of these first three films, is my favorite of the trilogy, partially because of the story, and also because of the visuals. I also really loved the characters in this one in particular, the students putting on the stage play, the journalist, the kind of romance that's there, but not necessarily the focal point, but it's still there in the background. So I think this is my favorite of these three films.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's super interesting too, the way it's constructed, right? Like you said, it's very dense because he considers it also an essay movie, which you can very much feel because he'll incorporate like news, like literal newspapers and stories from people in the town. He has people that were affected by the bombing speaking literally like basically as themselves in the film there.
Right, the use of
Um,
real people. Hmm.
Yeah, and it's really phenomenal. But even though it's very educational too, right? It drops all these interesting facts about World War II and how it affected these places. It's also very, very entertaining, as all Obayashi works are. I really like I said, the formal construction and the way that like it makes the audience much more active in their participation. It's not really something that, you can passively just absorb. You
Oh
really have
no.
to be present and thinking about the things that you're seeing because it'll like show you an image that you won't be able to make sense of right away. And then 2 hours later, it'll bring it back and finally give it context. And you have to actively recall, where you remember that from. And I just think that's like a really wonderful, unique, kind of experience to deliver for the audience. Not many movies ask you to do that or, give the audience the respect that they deserve to do that, right?
Yeah, he demands your attention and your intellect, and you have to be fully engaged. It is not a film you can just kind of kick back with a bucket of popcorn and just hope to passively engage in. So for
hmm
sure. So let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, so the next one we'll talk about is 7 Weeks. 7 Weeks is the story of a family that gathers in the snowy city of Ashibetsu in Hokkaido after the death of the patriarch Mitsuo. As the family's mourning is passing, a mysterious woman named Nobuko shows up, and her appearance gradually exposes wartime secrets and Mitsuo's hidden past. So this is a highly meditative film, reflecting on mortality, the meaning of life and our place within the world, and the devastating effects of war, and ultimately how we recover and move on in spite of it all. So this draws heavily on like kind of Japanese folklore, like the belief that the spirit roams the earth after death for 49 days to be remembered before moving on to heaven, hence why it's called 7 Weeks. And like I said, it's very much a movie about regeneration and recovery because Obayashi was also deeply affected by the Great Tohoku earthquake on 3/11, and he wanted to channel that memory of recovery into a movie. And so this is certainly a movie that does that. You can feel the devastation, and he ties it into, war and other things and the way that it impacts all these people. But it's also a hopeful movie by the end. So.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one. I think out of the trilogy, out of the anti-war trilogy, these first three films, this is probably my least favorite, which is to say I gave them all 4 stars on Letterboxd. So it's not like people will go on there and see a big difference. It's just like slightly less maybe. And in part because when I was reflecting back, we watched all these together over the last couple of months. And they're so dense that part of me was like, oh gosh, I wish I'd had time to rewatch them again. But then I'm also
Mhm.
thinking, okay, that's going to be 8 hours of my life that I don't have right now. But this one is the one I actually remembered the least in terms of being able to pull imagery from right away. Whereas like Casting Blossoms, which I think we watched earlier, I remembered a lot more of it. So I guess I
Mhm.
kind of take that. I think this one also might be the lowest budget, and it's shown in that this is the one that he had crowdfunded from the local village because
Mhm.
he had trouble getting money to make the movie, and so it I think kind of shows a little bit maybe in the filmmaking itself. That said, it's yet another, kind of beautiful meditation. You do think at some point, like, wow, he had this anti-war message in so many of his movies. It's like, how many different ways can you say war is bad? But it's not that simplistic, right? So he's also, violence in general is something I think that he abhors. And so I think he wants to also kind of take apart like society's roles in wars and government's
Mhm.
roles and colonize, the imperial, what's the word I'm trying to think of, but in Japan, the imperial government, I mean, he's definitely very critical of the government and people's complicity to allow war happen. And so it's there's a lot of themes he's exploring rather than just very simplistic war is bad, which of course, yes, that's what he's saying ultimately, but it's also like here's all these layers to that.
Yeah, he explores a lot of different facets of how war affects people personally, like, the relationships they have with themselves, with others, economically, just how it shapes the worldview.
Hmm.
And I think another great thing that I appreciate about Obayashi is he tends to focus on youth in like wartime and stuff, and his movies generally tend to focus on youth. This one I would say is actually probably the least of that case, but
Hmm.
like generally that's his focus because that's what he personally went through, right? He was born in 1938 in Eastern Hiroshima. So he grew up during the wartime, and he was a child when the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and all these things affected him deeply. And so that's why you often see it channeled through these films in a very personal manner. And I just really appreciate that. And I also want to give a shout out to the music in this one. I mean, it's
Mm.
phenomenal in all of them. But in this one, they introduced a band called the Pascals, which are a 14-person acoustic orchestra that use like toy instruments, pianica, violin, snare
That was one of my
drums,
favorite parts
classic.
of this film.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like they just use such a wide variety of instruments and things that you might not even consider instruments, but it makes such a beautiful, haunting melody. And it's something that he reuses a little bit like throughout the trilogy. This band starts to show up, even more in the others, and they show up in Labyrinth of Cinema too. And I just think it's so wonderful. I could listen to the music in this one forever. I mean,
Yeah, it's great music. And this one also, again, has the poetry of, you'll have to correct my pronunciation, Autumn Chuya Nakahara,
yeah.
who also comes back again. We see in Labyrinth of Cinema, a poet that I think is very near and dear to Obiyashi's heart. And the fact that there's
hmm
poetry in a lot of Obiyashi's films probably tells you everything you need to know about where we're going with this. But there's this great quote in this movie: "A death is a history." And so the idea of starting with the death of this older man and then looking back at his history, again, a personal history, which also reflects a society's history, or at least the society that he's part of, right? I think is really telling. The other famous part this movie is known for, is Obiyashi's own quote about the movie was that it's Guernica and moving pictures. For people that aren't familiar with Guernica, it's a very famous, one of the most famous paintings by Picasso that is about the ugliness and horrible and just absolutely horrific aspects of war. And it's a very, very famous painting that has all these images, just crazy images, kind of jumbled all together. And in a way, if you think about 7 weeks, it's and really the whole trilogy, I think, more than anything, is his film moving image version of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the artifice is brought to the foreground, just like in Picasso's paintings. They're not realistic as they were, but through that artifice, you find a deeper realism, something you connect with more spiritually. And I think that's Obayashi's whole MO. And that's, what I love him for. He understands that the magnitude of war can never be properly conveyed by trying to be realistic, right? Like
Right.
you can only draw out certain elements, and like the artificiality of it in many ways allows you to connect on a deeper level with you're not like a removed audience just watching this from a distance. You
Yeah.
connect with it much deeper.
It made me think, right before we started taping, we were talking a little bit with Brad about this movie that's out in theaters right now called Warfare, which has gotten some good reviews, surprisingly. And you and I saw it together. We're not reviewing it technically on the show, but I want to bring it up here because it is relevant to the Obayashi trilogy and really Obayashi's films in general, in that Warfare is being heralded because it's such a realistic depiction of war, right? It puts you right in the middle of a battle. But when it was over, I almost, number one, almost instantly forgot about the movie. You forgot about it so much that you forgot to log it on Letterbox. I gave it, I didn't think about the movie at all after I saw it. I didn't care about the characters. And that's very strange for a war movie, if you think about it. I mean, I think about when I was younger, I watched Deer Hunter with my dad, and I think that movie traumatized for me for like 2 weeks after I saw it because it was so impactful. And Obayashi's films, which are not realistic at all, as you brought up, are not even trying to be. That's not the point. Um, are depicting the emotional lives of the characters who have been affected by war, and you remember moments from his films, moments from what these characters have gone through, so much more than anything I saw in the 90 minutes of Warfare, of that movie Warfare. So I think the idea of making something quote unquote realistic, as you said, is very silly in a way because it's not going to be that way. We're not in the, unless
hmm
you're actually in a war, you couldn't possibly know what it's actually like physically and viscerally. And I think depicting the emotional state of what people feel is more impactful. And I think Obayashi gets that. He also
Absolutely.
doesn't want to just revel in blood and horror either. I think he's like, we already have enough of that
hmm
in our society. So,
Yeah. Wise
um,
man.
yes. So we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah, so the next one is Hanagatami, and Hanagatami is the story of a young man named Toshihiko who comes to the seaside town of Karatsu in Saga Prefecture in 1941 to live with his aunt. So this is just before the bombing of Pearl Harbor and leading up into it. And while there, he meets a number of other boys and girls who he's invariably attracted to in different ways. And the war creeps ever closer to home, and the group is eventually like drawn in different ways despite their efforts. It's a very beautiful, very romantic film. I think it's like imbued with a deep, deep sadness for innocence lost, right? Because these are young people that just never really got to be young because they grew up in wartime, and so their whole lives are shaped by that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, were you going to say something else?
No, no,
Yeah.
go ahead, keep going.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's another, hometown film. I love just the lived-in feel of it, because this is another one that was funded also by Karatsu and the people in there. And they had thousands of volunteers, literally thousands of volunteers, as like extras and crew helping out with this film. And so you can again just feel the deeply personal nature. And fun fact, this is also a script that Obayashi had written prior to House over 40 years ago, or 40 years before the release of this film. He was going to make it like his first, commercial debut. But it was at a time when Japan was really focused on economic recovery and the memory of war had pretty much faded. People were just focusing on, recovering on the economic side. And so he didn't think it was the right time. And so over like the 40 years and particularly leading up like into shooting it, he just did a lot of re-edits and refocused it. And unfortunately, he found that, in the late tens that war was creeping closer again, and he felt like it was the right time to make this. So I just think that's absolutely fascinating. It's also, he found out he had cancer and was given months to live prior to filming this movie. So he had assumed that this was going to be his last movie. And so again, I think it's just beautiful that this deeply personal piece, that he was able to complete it. And obviously he has one more after that, because as he says, he's lucky. So he got to, live long enough to do one more after this. But just a beautiful movie.
Yeah, I love this one. I really remember the characters in this one. Again, with the lack of realism, I think I annoyed you at the beginning because we were watching it together, and I was like, "Why are these people are way too old to be school children?" Because he's using the idea that they look like. I mean, because the actors don't look like kids. They're not. They're not. They're like young adults. But
Mhm.
and so at first, the Angela's German realistic brain went, uh-oh, what is this? What's going on? These people are too old to play these characters. And then I had to remember I'm watching an Obayashi film. I need to throw realism out the window. I need to like just step into his universe and
Mhm.
and go with the flow. And once you do that, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I
And more
was.
ages you, like maybe
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
more reflective of their
Yes,
mental state,
makes you look
really.
like from 12 to
Like,
25 because they all look like they're in their 20s, but that's
mhm.
fine. But yeah, no, I think this is a great film. I loved this one as well, and I love the scenes of the young people interacting. There is a character who's very ill, and that's in this one, right? The
It
character
is
with
in
the.
this one. Yeah.
Okay,
And on that
thank you.
note,
Sometimes
too,
I get it mixed up.
yeah, I did want to comment on that character as well. So that's Toshihiko's cousin, who he goes to live with. Her name is Mina, and that's a significant name, Mina, because if you've read Dracula, you'll recognize that there is a character named Mina in there, and this is very much reflective of that because she has a blood problem actually that she's dying from, and it's very much meant to, be an allusion to the blood-sucking nature of war and its all-consuming ideology and the way that it consumed the youth.
Well, I did
Mhm,
not know about that. That is really interesting. I wondered about the name Mina because it's
mhm,
obviously not a typical Japanese name either. So that's fascinating. I do want to
mhm.
get to Labyrinth of Cinema because I'm probably the most excited to talk about that. So we're gonna keep gliding on here to his final film, Labyrinth of Cinema from 2019. As Autumn mentioned, Obayashi thought Hanagatami was going to be the last film because he had been diagnosed with cancer and given only a few months to live. But he lived longer than expected and made what I think is his magnum opus, his really culminative film of his career. Which is also an anti-war film, but it's set in the last night of the existence of a small movie theater. So I love, and so it's set at a movie theater. So right then, you've got all the cinephiles. We're just with him, right? So in a seaside town, and it's supposed to be an all-night marathon of Japanese war films. and something happens, lightning strikes, literally, and the three young men, who are very different types of characters in this movie, are transported into the world on screen, and they start to basically kind of enact different scenes from Japan's past, not just World War II, but battles way back in the day with samurai and so it's very visually stunning because it's literally kind of taking you through both Japanese history as well as cinematic history with these three young men kind of popping in and out of scenes. There's also a young girl who plays a very key role as, in my opinion, what she's like representing kind of the symbolic lost youth, the tragedy of war.
Hmm.
It includes actors that you'll notice from all of his other films. He brings back actors he worked with before, obviously themes, and the fact that it's the last night of this dying movie theater, and of course he knows this is going to be his last film, makes it all the more poignant.
Yeah, I'm so glad that he was able to make this one, not just because it's a masterpiece, but because I really love Obayashi as a person, and I think he deserved to make another one. And this one is set in Onomichi, his actual hometown. So it's a return to his Onomichi, films, which he's done, I think, six or seven of.
Hmm.
He even shoots in his own home at some points of it. Like, it's just a really lovely, heartfelt film. You can feel that he's just pouring all of his love of cinema and his hometown and Japan and everything into this, while also offering it up, as like a tribute to cinema and the hope for, a more peaceful world. And I love that it's explicit about that. It's very explicitly anti-war and like hoping for world peace. You literally have a narrator say, that like this movie is made in the hopes of achieving world peace and everything. I just love that he's not afraid to, you know, just put that out there. And
Mm.
like a lot of people, I think would consider that corny, but I think it's, a beautiful sentiment because again, this is just a deeply personal piece. And like you said, I think Noriko, the girl here, is absolutely meant to represent the youth that were lost. She actually died during the bombing of Hiroshima in the first flash before she could even hear the boom of the atomic bomb. So she doesn't even know what killed her, and she's searching for some sort of like truth. And she says something along the lines of like, "I want to learn from movies. Like anything I don't know, I can learn from movies." And obviously, we deeply relate to that as cinephiles and lovers of film. But that's kind of the ethos of all of Obayashi's films, I think, from the very beginning, from House. Obayashi has said that he considers all his films to be like a diary of his life. And I think that's how a lot of us, film lovers can consider films, even if we don't make them. They're like bookmarks. And I think there's just something absolutely lovely about that. I love the way this shifts through different tones and genres. Like it's a musical at one time, it's an action film at another. It's
Hmm.
silent, it's a talkie, like it's just extremely experimental. Lots and lots of film references. Obayashi, spoiler alert, he plays John Ford in this, which I absolutely love because he was a huge fan of John Ford. There's just so much, genuine humanity imbued in this film. It's hard not to adore it.
It's packed
Yeah.
full of lots of references too. And if you don't get them all, it's okay because I didn't, and it just bears repeat viewings and maybe a little studying of Japanese history. But even if you don't get it on that level, it's just gorgeous to look at. And
Hmm.
Obayashi does appear, as you mentioned, in the film himself. He's playing piano, and he always often has musical instruments in his movies. So I loved that. To me, this is a masterpiece. It's up there with his best films, including Bound for uh, the one I can
Fields,
never
the
remember the
Mountains, and the
name of. Bound for,
Seacoast.
yes,
Yeah.
which I also think is one of his greatest films. Those are two films that are definitely, in my opinion, five-star films, not just four stars. So with that, we encourage you to check out the films of Obayashi as much as you can find them. Labyrinth of Cinema is probably maybe one of the easier ones to find. I don't know. They're not the easiest films to find, but look for them online or just buy them if you can on Blu-ray. As always, thank you, Autumn, for completing the films of Obayashi with me on the show. Have a great day and great movies.
Bye.
So, yeah, we had to give Labyrinth of Cinema a little bit short shrift there, but I think,
I
we
think
could,
we gave them kind of all, we shortchanged all of them. That's just the thing with Obayashi. Like you said, they're
you could
so
do,
dense
yeah, you
that
could do
like
30 minutes easily just on
on
one
a
of the
single film,
films.
for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
There's so much, I took so many notes. I had so much more I wanted to say, but like there's only so much time. I
Yeah.
mean,
So what's one of the points you really wanted to talk about that you didn't get to?
like for example, in Casting Blossoms to the Sky, it's this essay film that's, showing the audience all these little factoids and things that they might not know, things that generally, aren't, front and center in like a textbook or what have you, because it's as much, like he talks about in interviews about how American censorship, such as prohibiting the creation of memorials and teaching about the war explicitly, made it so children weren't able to learn the invaluable experience of defeat. And so they, focus mainly on economic recovery. And so he's really trying to convey that in that movie. He's trying to show the impact of defeat and how it's actually not, the end of the world. It's not a bad thing. It's actually good because from that, they learn humility and they learn how to like connect with the world at large rather than being just an ideological force or like unquestioning of, the government that's leading them into war, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, think about how we are in 2025. I mean, the people that were victorious, the countries
Hmm.
that were victorious in World War II. I mean, the countries that were defeated in some ways learned a valuable lesson, as you said, in humility, and also, had to really rethink their values. Whereas, Americans, we were like, yay, we were the saviors of the world and got a little bit, full of ourselves. And now we have, uh,
Hmm.
reaped more than we can sow, I would say. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of really good points to that. I have to say, like the first three films almost blend together a little bit until we were talking about them, and then I could kind of. And Labyrinth of Cinema, though, is very different, partially because of the movie theater setting, but also I feel like the focus on film itself and movies and movie portrayals of war. And
Hmm.
he's not quite out and out critiquing it per se, although maybe one could see.
I was like, I
Um,
think he totally is, right?
yeah,
Like
you think he
he's
is,
he's
yeah.
questioning like he both appreciates the value that the technology of film brings into our life. Obviously, it can allow for a lot of entertainment and we can learn a lot from film, a central theme in this. But he also is deeply questioning film's relationship to war and its portrayal and how it's used to propagandize and like how again it can inadvertently sometimes distance the viewer from war, right? It becomes mere entertainment rather than something real to learn from. Like
Hmm.
I thought it was a beautiful exploration of that theme, and it also doubles back to it's kind of a theme that's present in Casting Blossoms to the Sky, right? Because that's exploring the the thin line between like the bombs and the fireworks,
Hmm.
right? It's a technology that like can create such destruction when it's in the form of a bomb being rained down upon a city, but if you shoot it upward into the sky, all of a sudden it can be this beautiful thing, a flower blossoming in the sky. So he's very much questioning the role of technology and how we employ it and, looking for a better way, really.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I have to say, I don't like fireworks. I don't think I told you this when we watched the movies. I don't like fireworks. They looked great in the movie. I like fireworks in movies. I don't like
Mhm.
them in my real life. And so I was thinking, I could never live in that town. Too many fireworks going on. But I
You would
don't
be
like
like
the.
you'd be like the lady in the movie that's like her PTSD is basically triggered because of the fireworks.
Well, right. Well, it's actually a real thing. Like
Yeah.
veterans don't
Yeah.
like dogs and animals don't like fireworks. It is
Hmm.
like things exploding in the sky, so it's not one of my favorite things. They're beautiful. I just wish they didn't make so much noise, but
Yeah.
and smoke and everything. But you're right. Like the he's correlating these things, the bombs versus the fireworks made with kind of similar materials, right? So
Hmm.
so I thought that was really brilliant. But Labyrinth of Cinema really blew me away. I have to say, like I
Hmm.
easily I know I would want to watch that one again, partially because it's so dense. I felt like I needed to rewatch it again just to get more out of it. But I also, I guess I liked the movie within the movie within the movie, kind of aspects as they're
For
running around through these
sure.
different films. I that it brought it out of that trilogy where they're all set in these towns. Where even though I know this one is also set in his hometown, it had the scope of it because it is taking on the history of not only Japan and the history of warfare, but the history of cinema, lends,
Hmm.
that weight for a cinephile like myself. So,
It's something that you can watch again and again and again, and every time you're going to pull something new from it because it's so dense, it's so rapid fire that at any given time, 95% of it's probably going right over your head, and you're just lucky to catch a little glimpse. But even so, that's more than enough, to make it a satisfying experience. I never feel overwhelmed. I just feel like I want more,
mhm.
which is crazy because it's so maximalist.
Right. It's
Um,
it's a long film too. And so yeah, I think of his later films, Labyrinth of Cinema and Bound for the Mountains. I just call it that for short. That's
mhm.
that's my name for it. Are two of my favorite of his films. But I like, films throughout all the periods. It's just that those stick out to me as ones I would want to rewatch, I think,
For
and
sure.
see over and over again.
Yeah, I do. I was watching a lot of the special features from my Blu-rays too, and I wish we had time to talk about kind of the story behind the production of a lot of these because they're super interesting because he works with local municipalities, and a lot of them. I think perhaps all of them even. But there's a really lovely story for 7 weeks,
Mm,
the one set in Ashibetsu, and I'd love to relay that to you if you're interested.
yeah.
Yeah. So, Obayashi had visited Ashibetsu 20 years ago after a man from the town named Hyoji Suzuki invited him to visit because he wanted to start a film festival there.
Oh.
Hyoji had seen Miss Lonely Heart, Sabi Shinbo, which we reviewed on the show, a couple episodes ago, 20 years ago at the age of 15, and he was so inspired that he traveled to Onomichi to see the locations of the film. He looked for the temple in the film, but was having trouble. And when he asked an old man he found, the old man said he would lead him there. So they walked for over an hour before coming across a woman who told him the man wasn't all there mentally, and so he would never be able to lead them to the temple. But then Hyoji thought about it and he realized that it was wonderful because he too one day will be an old man wandering around, and maybe a young boy would come and ask him for directions, and then they would spend all day walking together. Um, and then this led him to, that experience specifically led him to working for the city council in Ashibetsu and working in the tourism division.
Hmm.
He created pamphlets that eventually made their way to Obayashi, who visited Hyoji thinking that he was in a higher position because Hyoji had invited him to the town. He was not. But Obayashi met with the mayor and the heads of council, and then he and Hyoji started a film festival called Nobuhiko Obayashi's Pirate Film Festival, which was named after a pirate, because Obayashi's mother was a direct descendant of this pirate. Obayashi then consulted with his wife eventually and let the event become Ashibetsu's, calling it the Starry Hometown Ashibetsu Film School. And I just think it's an absolutely lovely story.
Did they find the temple? I mean,
No,
wait,
I don't think they
you
did.
buried the lead. Where's that? Did
Yeah.
they never found it was the temple, but it must have been there, right?
It
Because he
was
filmed
there, but
there.
it's very much like on the outskirts of Onomichi apparently. It's like a little
Okay.
temple that like not many.
How big of a town is Anamichi?
It's not super big, but it's a port town, so I think it's a little bit more sprawling and things like I
Oh,
don't think
okay.
it's
Because I'm
super
saying you said they walked for
populated.
an hour. I thought, wow, how big is
Yeah.
this
But
town?
also he was walking with an old man who maybe didn't walk that fast, right?
No, that's true. It's like
Um,
walking with me. Okay.
but yeah, the Starry Town or Starry Hometown Ashibetsu Film School continued for like 20 or 30 years or something after that. And
Oh, wow. Is there still a
they
film festival there?
I haven't been able to find anything on if it's still going, but
Oh, okay.
it went for decades after that.
That's a great
And
story.
then yeah, 7 weeks was funded by donations from the people of Ashibetsu, which was a town with a severely declining population, which is
Hmm.
explored in the movie
In the movie,
itself.
yeah.
Yeah, by the time the film was made, it was down to a population of a little over 15,000 people. And the locals got together to create the snow, feed the crew, scout locations, all sorts of things. And I just think it's an absolutely, yeah, lovely story. I was
Yeah,
very
that's
happy to
great.
hear that.
That's great. Yeah. I love that he uses the local places and
Hmm.
gives you ideas of places to visit when you go back to Japan too, Autumn.
Absolutely.
You have to
Yeah.
maybe go back to that town.
And then
But
speaking of like banding together too, for Hanagatami, the town also banded together for this one. Karatsu actually is a town that had no movie theater.
mm,
There's not a single movie theater in it. But there was an organization that was dedicated to bringing one to the town. But they had very, very limited resources. So the best they could do for a long time was screening films at like the city hall occasionally.
hmm
Um, but then they invited Obayashi over there, and eventually like got so much support from the people of the town that they funded Hanagatami, and over 500 people volunteered to help with the research and ideas for the film because they incorporate a lot of like local customs and traditions.
And all those
Um,
news pieces. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, there were 40 shooting locations and over 3,000 volunteers and extras
Wow.
participated. And the crazy thing is too, right? Despite how dense these movies are, they're shot very quickly. There was only 50 days of filming for Hanagatami and 40 days of filming for 7 weeks, which compared to American films is like nothing. Um,
Wow.
but
You
yeah,
wouldn't
I
know to look at them too because they're so, like you said, so dense.
Yeah, and like the techniques that he's using are like really advanced actually. Like watching the behind the scenes, I was blown away. He's constantly using like, spinning pedestals to spin his actors while filming, the camera on like dollies, bringing them in. Like they're very complex movements and things, and the way he brings them together is it just feels so seamless that you don't even question it. But that's a master at work. And then the parade in that movie in Hanagatami, that was the first time the parade had ever been filmed, like, obviously not by like amateurs or whatever.
Oh, I see.
They
So
they
that was
never
a parade they already had in that
That was a
town.
parade that they already had. They did it every year or whatever, but they had never worked with any commercial projects to film it or anything. And so the people were very hesitant to perform the parade just for the sake of this movie because, they obviously can't do it on their regular thing. They had to set up all these green screens and other things. It was a production. So he had to work with the local council and get that approved. But, obviously Obayashi's a lovely man, so he won them all over. And by the time it was over, everyone was super proud to have this movie set in their hometown. Like I was actually getting emotional watching the behind the scenes. You can just see and feel how beloved Obayashi was by everyone in his crew and the way that he connects people with their own hometowns. Like these people are talking about how they never thought to look into the history of the place they had lived their whole lives or whatever,
Hmm
but now they have a different lens to look at it through and they appreciate it, just so much more. And I just think that's the power of cinema. And it takes somebody like Obayashi with that deeply imbued humanity to bring it out.
I wish he'd lived long enough to make a movie here in Salem. Then you
You're
could have
right.
met him.
Yeah.
Then you could have met him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been great. Well,
He's a
yeah,
big fan of America. He came over here many, many times. Like if we were lucky enough and ahead of the curve enough, we maybe could have done
it's
that.
hard.
If we lived in New York.
Neither of us got to meet our favorite filmmaker. So you never got
Yeah.
to meet Obayashi. I never got to meet Robert Altman, but
Yeah.
we still love
So
their films.
yeah, I also found out a fun fact, which is that Obayashi actually went to Monument Valley for a week and shot a program for NHK, which is their national broadcasting channel, about John Wayne. So it was all about like following in his footsteps. So they went to his
John
alma
Wayne, not
mater.
John Ford.
John Wayne. Yeah, this
Oh,
this was about John Wayne. But
okay,
he
interesting.
obviously loves both Wayne and Ford.
Mhm.
But they went to his alma mater and even got to like visit his daughter, which I think is like super cool. I looked for this program. I really wanted to watch it, but I was not able to find it.
Uh,
But I just think it's super cool and it's something
Internet
again.
fail. Someone get that out there.
Right? I know. Yeah. But you can just feel, the love of that imbued in everything, but particularly Labyrinth of Cinema when he dresses up as John Ford and
Hmm.
goes to his own Monument Valley, that rock out
Right.
there. And
Yeah. It's still
it's,
too bad that his films are still so hard to find in America, but it's
mhm,
better than it used to be, but it's, not great still, considering how many other Japanese masters, their films are so much more accessible. So
mhm.
hopefully one day,
One day.
thanks
Yeah,
to people like you getting the word out.
that's
So,
right.
yeah.
He's the best. Everybody should watch him.